All right, we have a panel discussion here. This is, again, from your feedback. By filling out the evaluations, several of you have asked, well, a lot of you asked, why don't you do some panel discussions and not just give us speeches, but also inform us about stuff. And one of the requests was on social media. So I got three friends of mine, Brad Jackson and Shafer and Kristina Ribali. Brad runs Coffee and Markets. You can find that podcast at RedState every weekday. Raz works for a group that is dedicated to the cause of righteousness, liberty, and Ted Cruz for president. And Kristina works for the Foundation for Government Accountability. And they are going to come up and spend the next 30 minutes answering your questions and talking to you about getting social media right from the right. And I will point out that they routinely say that conservatives are dominant on Twitter. But it's one thing to be dominant on Twitter, but then to also make things happen. That's kind of the next step, that level of engagement. And they will explain it all to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming. I am Brad Jackson, the host of Coffee and Markets, but I'm sure everybody in this room knows that already because you listen every day. Oh, thank you, right up here. If you don't listen, you can find Coffee and Markets on the top at RedState. We're also at coffeeandmarkets.com. We do a 20 to 30-minute show every morning that discusses major issues in politics, the marketplace, and culture. Today, we are going to have our live edition of Coffee and Markets here with Kristina Ribali. She's the digital director at Foundation for Government and Accountability.
Morning, y'all.
And then down the way there is Shafer. He's the executive director of Draft Ted Cruz for President. I'm sure everybody here would like to see that happen. See, she's the pretty one, but I think you actually got more claps there. That's pretty amazing.
That's the power of Ted Cruz.
That is the power of Ted Cruz right there now, isn't it? Well, we're going to talk this morning about the power of social media, and we're going to talk about results, not just rhetoric. And there are a lot of people online who spend a lot of their time tweeting and working on Facebook, but not always in an effective manner. Excuse me, it is Coffee and Markets, and I'm still on my first cup of coffee. So, Kristina, I want to start with you. You came through politics, starting as essentially an angry mom who was looking to change the world in Oregon. So why don't you tell us about your first efforts in social media and what you were able to accomplish?
An angry mom, Brad? Do I look angry? No, I'm very passionate.
I have
mom.
seen you angry before. I can attest to that.
I'm a very passionate mom. I come from the progressive purgatory of Portland, Oregon. And so how many of you are parents? And your kids are your life, right? And they are mine. And I got involved in politics to change the attitude around school choice and to really work to provide better options for children everywhere. And when you live in a state, a very blue state, or almost in every state, you have to fight unions. I was a blogger, an anonymous blogger. I would write all the time under an assumed name and write on left-wing sites to try to get people to talk about the problems in the education system, especially in Oregon. And I had to sort of come out of the closet as a conservative when I filed charges against the Oregon Education Association for violating election law. So I could no longer be anonymous. So I used social media to build a following to help amplify my voice. And with that, in 2008, me and about 30 other moms were able to stop a bill that would have killed online charter schools. We were outspent. I think the union spent close to $2 million to push a bill through the Oregon legislature that would have destroyed all the charter schools, would have cut access to those schools for 1,500 children that were below poverty level. And so I used social media to rally these moms to start finding a voice for their kids because their legislators weren't listening to them. And all the people, the big union bosses, they weren't listening to them. But when we could use social media, Facebook, Twitter, to rally over 500 parents to show up with their kids when that bill's being heard, it's very hard to say no to children in their little t-shirts saying, "I like my school choice." And it's very hard to say no to that. And so we're gonna have this discussion about using, it effectively. You can either create a lot of noise on social media, and there's a lot of people that just create noise, or you can create action. You can use it to tell a story. You can create emotion. So I would encourage you to do that. But yeah, it's a huge win. Again, I tell everybody, how did you get started? I'm just a loudmouth mom. I'm a loudmouth mom that learned how to use a keyboard. But it really is, social media is the democratization of the media now. You don't need anybody's approval to have a blog or a Twitter and those sort of things. So it's a way to get your voice out.
Raz, I want you to talk about, you were instrumental in the, let's say, the rise of Ted Cruz online. Ted was able to grab onto the social media world and really use it to propel him. Why don't you talk about how Senator Cruz has used, I imagine, most everybody in this room and those elsewhere to make what was a very small campaign with a long shot to win into the senator that we saw speak here last night?
Well, it was a long road. How many of you guys are actually from Texas? Wonderful, wonderful. So going back a couple years ago, I think most of us here have heard Senator Cruz make the joke about how, when he first started out, he was at 2% in the polls and the margin error was 3%. I worked for him for about 14 months on the Senate staff, and so I heard that and a bunch of other ones that I could just riff on Ted Cruz jokes for a while. And you've seen most of them on Twitter. For Senator Cruz, I would work for the Madison Project. At the time, we were the first PAC to endorse the senator during his race, and he had very little money. He had very little name ID, but what he was willing to do is he was willing to go around to a lot of little places, talk to small groups of people, and he was willing to engage with people and talk about what he believed. And that was online and off. And one of the things we talked about a little bit off stage was that you have to have strategic goals when it comes to social media. And you have to have them broken down as far as near, mid, and long term. And obviously he had a long-term goal of becoming a senator and possibly stuff further down the line as far as being effective in legislative goals. And midterm, he had to get through a primary. And before that, he had to get somebody to know who he was. And before many of us did, he had to go out and start engaging. So through social media, and I think a huge kudos got to go to Josh Perry. He's on the senator's staff right now, and he was a huge part of driving that digital program. And so Josh still does a great job for the senator, and is I think because of Josh and because of the senator's understanding as an individual of social media, that they have one of the best digital teams and one of the most active social media presences of anybody. So I'll talk about, real quick, two examples. So we got Jim DeMint and Ted Cruz, both rock stars in my book of a very high degree. But as far as the era in which they were senators, they were kind of adjacent. But with Jim DeMint doing his work as a lone voice through a lot of his career, as working to help make conservative things happen and stop bad stuff in DC, he didn't really have access to many of the social media tools. Those were coming out towards the end of his Senate career. And Senator Cruz, they had kind of come to their own by the time he was starting to join in. And I think that Senator Cruz's use of social media to really help harness a lot of energy that we see on the grassroots level. Through trying to help make DC listen and give each of you the power to influence policy out there, far away, with people that don't really want to know what you think or act on it. So because he's been able to do that and use those tools effectively, he as an individual has been able to wield a much bigger stick. And we've seen that from whether it goes through the defund work last year, whether it's through doing things like trying to help get the State Department's attention on Miriam Ibrahim, or any of the other individuals that he talked about last night that are Americans that are jailed in foreign countries that the State Department doesn't care about. You look on his Twitter feed, on his social media feed, and he's talking about those folks every day. because he doesn't want them to be able to be forgotten like many people want to. So think about your strategic goals as you're deciding what you want your social media presence to be. You got to think about what do you want to accomplish. Don't just start deciding that you want to tweet a lot or you want to put a lot on Facebook. You got to have a plan, because otherwise you're spinning your wheels and you're going nowhere. I think we'll talk more about that. But.
I just want to piggyback on that. Like he said, to be intentional, and I will say this too, every single one of you is an individual and unique, so find your voice and be real. Don't think that you have to do social media just like somebody else. If you're authentic and real, you build a following. You are most effective with the people that know you. And so for me, you know, I was effective as a spokesperson against that bill on a charter school because I was a mom and my kid went to that charter school. Now, if I was trying to speak on some foreign policy issue that I had no idea, nobody was going to believe me. So, you know, be real and be authentic and be intentional. And I think that you're gonna be able to amplify your voice, and social media does help you do that.
The other thing I think we should talk about is that when you have very specific, as you mentioned, you have to have very specific goals for your social media plan. Let's talk about one of those for each of you guys. Last year at this event, and some of you how many people here were here last year in New Orleans? Good crowd. Yeah. Last year when Ted spoke, one of the things that really took fire online from that speech was the hashtag #MakeDCListen. And he used it again last night, and it's something that the campaign and the grassroots still use today. Talk about how a hashtag the importance of a hashtag, I guess, and what it can rally people to.
Well, we've seen some pretty good examples in the last year of some hashtags being used for some good things, and #MakeDCListen be one, and some bad things. And it turns out that does not do so well on the diplomacy side. And this administration still hasn't figured that out, but we'll see if it happens. I hear a hashtag is in the works for Iraq, and it's going to solve everything. So, you know, like Brad said, last year with the launch of the #MakeDCListen campaign. So, as far as strategic goals go, the strategy preceded the hashtag. Right, so one of the themes that's run throughout Senator Cruz's primary campaign, his general election, and through the tenure of his term in office has been the idea that he wants to help give a voice to every one of us out in these states, red states, blue states, purple states, wants to give us the opportunity to force DC to listen to us, and that there's a huge disconnect that he wants to help bridge. So that was the strategy from day one. That's why Texans rallied around him and why Americans do today. And we were able to use the #MakeDCListen hashtag, and that was a sentiment. It was distilled down into a sentiment that made people very passionate. And so when we think about slogans in general from a public relations or a standpoint, that's what helps. We got to think about marketing, and it puts everything about Ted Cruz and much of what we talk about as Red Staters into one little tag. And as it turns out, we're able to use that to help categorize discussion and help bring people together and put all of us, you know, in the specific case of Facebook and Twitter with the hashtags, we can use that to find each other, because we're all out there, you know, tweeting with the #MakeDCListen hashtag, which you all should be doing. And as we do that, we can identify other people, other Red Staters, other conservatives that agree with us, that want to fight alongside us, and that want to help support the senator and others like him in DC that want to make DC listen to us.
Kristina, I'd like you to talk about you are now a queen of Twitter with more followers than we could all imagine, but you didn't start that way. How can someone start with just a few followers and make a big impact? Ted Cruz did that as well, but can you give us an example of how you were able to use Twitter to really make a difference, even when you didn't have the 10 bazillion followers that you have today?
He exaggerates. I only have 1 bazillion.
Okay.
No. Many of you I know personally, but many of you, the way that I met you the first time or had any conversation with you was Twitter. Twitter is the best way to engage the media, to engage writers that you like, bloggers, politicians. Any politician worth their salt has a communications director watching their mentions and all those sort of things. So you don't have to have a lot of followers to be effective. I get a little emotional when I tell this story, but the very first time that I really started to engage people on Twitter. Personally, I had run campaigns for politicians and people running for office candidates on Twitter, but never really engaged myself. But when the union started to come after me, I needed backup. And one of the very first people I reached out to was Andrew Breitbart. And I tweeted at him, and I said, hey, could I get your help? Could I get your eyes on something? Here's what I'm dealing with in my state. He followed me, sent me a DM with his phone number, and said, call me, I'll help you. I had 108 Twitter followers, and I had an egg as my Avi because I was scared as a conservative in Oregon. My husband had a business, all those things that you know that they're coming for you, and you know that you need backup. But I tell that story because Andrew didn't help me because I had 10,000 followers. Andrew didn't help me because, of my face or anything like that. Andrew helped me because I told a compelling story. And I was able to get in touch with him and say, this is what I'm dealing with in my state. Will you help, or can you find someone to help me? That is the power of Twitter. I met Connie Burton through Twitter. I met, Brad. In fact, the first time I ever heard of Coffee and Markets was on Twitter. Some of my best friends in this movement today that have come from that medium, if you use it correctly. And so to build your following, engage, engage, engage. And when I say engage, I don't mean tag people and spam them every time you tweet. Please don't do that. There is some Twitter etiquette, but engage, ask questions, be real. Get to know people by saying, what is your thought on this? I know that I don't know everything. So I ask a lot of questions on Twitter because I genuinely want to know what people think about these issues and how things are coming across. So you can build your Twitter following, by engaging, by following other people that are like-minded. People ask me all the time, do you engage with trolls? I do not. Very, very, very infrequently do I ever respond to any of that because they're online to waste your time. They are there to drag you away from your mission. So I just don't engage unless it's somebody that has a very large following that I think I may be able to influence someone, but they are online to take your time and to steal your influence and to drag you away from what you're doing. So I don't engage.
I like to think of everything that I do online in terms of adding value, both to the online community as well as to my viewers, to my subscribers, whoever they may be that's following me. Because if I look at, for my strategy, I have the specifics of what I want to do to help get Ted to run for president. And so I'm helping on that side, but also want to be somebody that's out there talking to conservatives to help bring people on board and educating my fellow Red Staters. And so think about how you're going to add value, whether it's from your tweets, your Facebook post. Put some thought into that, because I see too many people that don't put thought into what they tweet, how they tweet, what they put online. And if you're not doing that, you're not being constructive. And you're definitely not helping your personal brand, because that's incredibly important. The book that actually got me to start a Twitter account several years ago, or back in '09, it's called Tribes. It's by Seth Godin, and it's an awesome book. It's very, very short. But I was halfway through that book, and he was talking about building your tribe and having an influence over those around you and in your field. And I put the book down and went and signed up for Twitter, and a few thousand tweets later, here we are. I recommend, one, that you read that book, but two, put some thought into how you add value, because people aren't just going to follow you because you're cool or you're nice. It may be because you're famous or you're good looking, but since I didn't have those assets, I had to go for something a little more positive. So think about how you're going to add value. Be careful of your credibility. If you're posting links and doing things, put some thought into checking to make sure they're legit. Don't just go for a buzzy headline. Because if you're somebody if I'm following you and I start seeing that the stuff you're tweeting is not legitimate, then I'm going to unfollow you. I look to people like, the Eric Ericksons, Ben House, Chris Dana Lash, and those folks. I follow them on a daily basis, and these guys as well. Because I know if they're tweeting something, it's something I should listen to. And you want to be that same kind of resource.
We're going to go out on a topic here with Kristina, but Roz knows that he has always been followed by the Duck Dynasty folks because they compare their beard to his. Kristina, you now work at the FGA, and you guys have campaigns from time to time where you go after specific issues or you go after specific people. What are you guys working on now that where social media has really made a difference? It's important, as part of what we're talking about up here, it's important to know that what you do online, in order for it to be truly effective, it needs to have both an online action and an offline action. It must drive people to do something. Talk about that.
Sure. I work for the Foundation for Government Accountability. We work only on healthcare and welfare reform. And we're a fairly new organization, been around for 3 years, but one of the things that we do is work with legislators on fixing broken government systems like healthcare and welfare. And as you know, the biggest expansion right now that we're dealing with in terms of welfare is Medicaid. It's the largest welfare expansion in our history. And one of the things that we started to realize was that legislators didn't know a whole lot about Medicaid expansion, and many governors, thinking oftentimes that they're the smartest person in the room, don't listen to policy people. Do we have any folks here from Indiana? No? I don't see any.
No,
okay.
No one from the Hoosiers.
I knew that my online goals and all of the processes that we were going through with one of our latest campaigns was working when I said, yeah, I work for Foundation for Government Accountability, and this gal said, oh, you guys are the ones taking on Governor Pence. And I said, yes, that would be us. Governor Pence right now is looking to expand Medicaid, has submitted waivers, and everything that we are doing for our campaign right now is to educate the citizens of the state of Indiana of how bad this is going to be. We drove the largest amounts of HHS Medicaid comments in Indiana's history in a few short days. In 4 days, we drove the largest amount of comments ever on an HHS waiver, which it's not, Medicaid is not sexy. It's very hard to get people to get excited about stopping Medicaid expansion, but when you start to explain it in terms of this is how it's going to affect the neediest in your state, this is what it's going to do to your budget, and you can get people to take action. We got hundreds of people in just a few days to take action online and submit their information to Governor Pence and say, we don't want this. We don't want Medicaid expansion. We don't want to have this in our state. Here's a reform measure that you can do that's not going to do this. And so using online tools, petitions, digital outreach, Facebook, Twitter, those sort of things, we were, like I said, able to drive the largest amount of comments ever for an HHS waiver in a few short days, and a couple $100. I mean, we're not talking massive budgets. You know, you really, once you learn some of those tools, you can drive the conversation with a very small budget.
All right, so we've got time, I think, for a few questions. If anyone wants to ask Raz or Kristina a question. We've got one coming up right here. Yes, sir, how are you? Thank you.
Thank you. Rick Whalen from Johns Creek, Georgia. This is for Kristina, the angry mom.
I'm not angry.
We could have used you a couple of years ago. My kids, 3 of my kids went to a charter school in Johns Creek, and from the initial announcement that it was going to be there, it was attacked. And eventually it closed down after about 3 years. So we didn't have the foundation to keep it going. The thing that scares me today, though, is what's going on with Common Core. It's something that's, I feel as though it's just creating a bunch of robots for industry later on, and I'm wondering what's the proposal from the conservative groups on how we can combat something like Common Core.
Can you guys hear him okay? It's a little hard to hear when he's talking about Common Core and what are the proposals for the different groups. So Common Core is, you know, federal mandated standards, and there's a lot of groups doing a lot to stop Common Core, and because every state is different, it really is a state issue. And so I would encourage you, there are groups all over the place on the internet that are working in their state legislators, working at the local level, going through the school board, all of that to stop Common Core. My sister is was a teacher, and she quit teaching because of Common Core. And so it's pretty bad news. But I know Glenn Beck just did a great special about it, and it's still online. You can find all of that information out there. But as far as social media has been pivotal in getting people's attention on Common Core. Michelle Malkin has been absolutely relentless on it, and if you're on Twitter, the hashtag, if you search the hashtag Stop Common Core, everybody that tweets about it is on there. Follow them, get their information, and find out what's happening at your local level. I know several people in my current state of Oregon. There's a moms group that started, former teachers and stuff, all to stop Common Core, working with legislators, those sort of things. So it is happening. There's a huge pushback. The parents are winning. The parents are winning when it comes to Common Core. And it's because social media gives just an angry mom or dad, or it gives you a voice, to be able to push back on those things, and they are winning.
Got another one?
Yes, Barry Schleck. First of all, I'd like to thank Raj Shafer. He was one of my first followers on Twitter.
Look at that.
He encouraged me to go from 1 or 2 followers up to 3,000 or whatever I got now. But I appreciate that, and that is one element. I think that we could mentor to new people that come on Twitter that and encourage them. Certainly, he did that for me, and I appreciate that. Can I ask you, how do you integrate your Twitter and your Facebook? I tend to use my Twitter to, follow, dump it on Facebook. But is that a common? I mean, how do you do that?
That's actually a great question.
Well, first of all, Barry's awesome, and you guys should follow him on Twitter. I've known Barry for a number of years, and he lives here in the DFW area, and is fantastic. So thank you for following me, Barry. The way I work it, and it's different for everybody. So 3 of the primary social networks there are 4. So I pretty much engage on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Those are the primary ways that I engage online. And so the way I kind of break those down is Instagram, just pictures, obviously, and I share some stuff around. And that I share a lot of the stuff on Facebook and Twitter from there. And that's, for those of you who don't know, that's exclusively pictures and some video now. Twitter, I use as my broadcast tool. I try to reach out. I follow a lot of people. I use it as both broadcasting my opinions and information that I want to help share and drive offline and online action, as well as my primary news source. So outside of some of the websites I follow, like RedState and a few others, that's where I get my news on a daily and really hourly basis. That's what I'm tracking to figure out what's happening in the world. And anytime when, I've had my phone off for about 20 minutes, and I'm starting to get jittery, and it's not the caffeine, it's simply withdrawals from being able to tweet. So I'm gonna figure out what the heck's been going on while I've been up here in a little bit. And so that's my primary both outreach and news source. Facebook, I use it in a much more personal way. That's primarily people that I know, I've met personally. Very few of my friends on there are folks that I only have an online relationship with. And that's just my little more personal side. So I like to just know people, and I'm gonna interact with you on there, and it's because we've met, because we have something more in common. And so Twitter's my online relationship tool, and Facebook's my more personal one.
I think we got time for one more.
And I just want to piggyback on that really, really quickly. You asked about integration from Facebook to Twitter. I recommend, when I was doing consulting for candidates, I recommended never linking them. They're 2 completely different universes with 2 completely different languages. So I would encourage you not to link them unless it's the absolutely only way that you will share information. I would encourage you to not do that. I would encourage you to use Twitter, like you said, as a broadcast mechanism. I'm the same way on Facebook. I'm sorry if I have not accepted your Facebook friend request. If I don't know you personally, I will not. But I use Twitter the same way. So they're 2 different universes. Keep them separate if you can. And again, be authentic. Use them the way that it makes the most sense to you to use them.
So now I understand why I'm not on your Facebook friend.
You are my Facebook friend.
Over here.
Good morning to all of you. You look beautiful as usual.
Oh, thanks. We appreciate that. She hears it all the time.
I'm sending you a check already. Hush.
Well, I want to
You just made her Facebook friend list, by the way.
I know. Yay. I wanted to ask your guys' opinion about sort of using Twitter to reach out to people, but maybe not through talking about politics. You know how you started this morning saying that each of us are individuals, so each of us have our background, maybe the music that we like, the movies that we like. I find that, at least for me, on Twitter, I get people from both the left and the right to I start having a relationship with them by talking about, well, what movies do you like? What music do you listen to? And I'm sort of wondering how you guys feel about starting talking to people that way, and then maybe building on, these are the issues that we think are important, kind of getting them to like us a little bit more rather than just, okay, these are our issues and this is how we feel about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, it goes back to being authentic. I don't live and breathe policy and politics. I'm a mom. I love to cook. I love to mix cocktails. I like certain music. And I tweet about that too. And I find I get a vast, a much broader variety of people. Because again, I'm real. I don't, only like 10% of the population is as crazy as we are and live and breathe this stuff all the time, right? So again, if all you ever do is preach to the same choir, you're never going to expand that base. So yeah, I sometimes tweet about, my daughter's softball. I actually had somebody walk up to me at a meeting the other day and say, did your daughter make it to championships? I was following you on Twitter and I saw your daughter's, tweets about your daughter's softball game. And I was like, no, they didn't make it. But, and because again, that's how they know me. They just know me from, my family. And I just tell people, share what you're, comfortable sharing. But, if I'm putting out a pie recipe because I just baked a pie and, a liberal ends up following me, great. Yeah. Because that's one more person that we're going to be able to reach out to, and one more way that we're going to find commonality. And, I have a very good friend who's dominant on Twitter, and she posts all this stuff about music all the time, and she's gotten a lot of people to think about her very libertarian positions because she opened the conversation based on the music. Again, if you're intentional and you're real and you're authentic, people are going to follow you. They're going to like you. I don't follow anybody that just auto-tweets stuff from RSS feeds because I can get that myself. I want to build relationships with people and find out what makes them tick. My job now is to take very difficult policy positions and turn them into 140 characters or put it on a cat meme so people will share it. And so in order to be able to talk like real people, I need to talk to real people about stuff that they talk about and care about. And I think that's, again, a great way to use social media that way.
Rev?
We are pretty boring people if we just talk about politics all the time. Because in spite of the fact that we here, like you said, are probably part of the craziest 10% that are focused on politics more than most and know what's going on in the world, if all we talk about is politics, then we're not very interesting individuals. Because that's an echo chamber, we're preaching the choir at that point, and nobody else is going to listen to us. Senator Cruz is a good example. He doesn't just tweet about politics or press releases or even news stories or op-eds, right? So you see, a few weeks ago, there was a BuzzFeed list talking about the movie Princess Bride, which is the senator's favorite movie. He quotes it at length, and you drive him around for a little bit, and all of a sudden you start having his impressions popping into your head when you watch the movie, and it's kind of scary.
He's only mostly dead.
Yeah. That's been said of him several times. So if you follow me on Twitter and you look at my bio line, I don't just talk about politics. I mention politics, and obviously if you follow me, you see some of that, but I also talk about that there are other things that I like. So I'm a pretty big fan of cigars, guns, fly fishing, Jesus. Yeah, exactly. I like some of these things a lot. And, I have about as many people that I meet that come up to me and say, hey, I follow you on Twitter, and I really love the stuff you've been putting out on politics. I have a whole lot more people that mention to me that they like my pictures of my 140-pound Great Dane dog or my 6-pound little Chiweenie that my wife got me. Those probably do more. Yeah, it's a Chihuahua and wiener dog, and it's a weird-looking little dog, but it's fun.
Was that combined in a lab, or how did that actually happen?
Nobody knows, my friend. Nobody knows. Don't ask those questions. I think they had someone like that on South Park one time. So I make myself a whole lot more interesting by doing those things because I talk about and I care about more than that. And so for my personal brand and why I want people to engage with me, that's a lot higher on the list. And I'll give, Dana Lash is a good example. I think pretty much everybody here knows Dana or follows her work. And congrats to her, by the way. She's going to start a daily program on the Blaze TV. That's awesome. So if you don't follow her, give her a shout. But Dana does a great job she's incredibly aggressive and perseveres in a real awesome way on Twitter. And she will stand up, much like Kristina was talking about Breitbart earlier, and very much having come up under him, she stands up for those little guys and fights hard every day. And so she's aggressive in a political way and tries to make sure that our voices are being heard. But she also is very open about that she likes to know other things. And whether it's, getting to know the Fort Worth area and tweeting pictures from stockyards or different vacations, there's more to her than just politics. And you don't have to know on a personal level like we do to see that, because you get a picture of that. And that makes us harder to caricature and harder to hate. Because it's easy if you see somebody as just the auto tweeting or just tweeting links to really conservative RedState articles, it's easier to hate us and easier to make us a caricature. But all of a sudden, when you force them to see you as human, that changes the equation.
My wife and I just had our second baby, and you can watch the story of our pregnancy by looking at my Twitter feed of what we ate for those 9 months. So that's a lot of what I post. Well, thank you, everybody.
I think the most liked picture I ever had on Facebook was one that I posted on Thanksgiving morning of me in an apron cooking a cherry pie.
That's right.
And it was like the most liked. I know. Scott's like, yes. Because people want people who are real, right? You want your politicians to be real. You want people to be real. So.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. You can find us all online. Raz is at Raz Shafer, at Kristina Ribali. I'm at Brad W. Jackson. You can, of course, find Coffee and Markets at RedState and coffeeandmarkets.com. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Facebook. And we're doing the Facebook thing.
Yes, and we'll be doing a Facebook Q&A panel after this, so if you would like to join us on Facebook, you can as well. So thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here.